Hello, and welcome to another fully live episode of Hacking with Friends. My name is Kody Kinzie. I am a security researcher at Varonis, and today we are running a little extra on Hacker Time. And you guys, we lost Killian, but he's okay. He's just busy. So it's just going to be me today. I had a little bit of setup time when I got back. I noticed, as some of you might have noticed on the last stream, that our Restream account got deactivated. So I had to go low res, no graphics. Like there was a bunch of stuff I couldn't do. So I had to put some time into setting all that stuff back up today, but we are up and running again. So hopefully I don't look like a potato and you actually got to see the intro video today. So yeah, a little bit of I guess a billing mistake sort of thing, but I do have to give a shout out to the Restream people for getting us hooked up again today, because otherwise, if I had to do that again, I probably just would have done OBS. So good to see everyone. Is Hacker Time when everyone else is asleep? For me, probably yes. I really like late night coffee shops. So you can typically find me at like a coffee shop at like 2 or 3 in the morning doing some of my finest work, while everybody who has to understand it in the morning is sound asleep. Good to see everyone in the chat. We have a lot of people who seem to like the show a little bit later, so I don't really mind doing that, honestly. I like doing it later as well. I like being up late, waking up a little bit late, and then kind of going through the news that I read the night before, and that is exactly what we're going to do. There's a couple really big stories that came out this week that I can't avoid talking about at all, because like people are going to be asking. So we are going to be talking about the flaws in Apple Silicon. We're also going to be talking about the fact that you can get into, I think it's like 60-something% of hotel room doors that use a certain type of technology, and there are millions of them. So we're definitely going to be talking about those today. Yeah, hello, Artificially Interesting. So we are live. This isn't the Q&A stream, but I will try to answer questions if I see them pop up. But I do love seeing people who are dropping in, maybe catching it for the first time. That's why maybe we just do it later, you guys. Like, I think it's kind of fun to do it at like 1 or 2 p.m. in whatever time zone I happen to be in. So if this time works for you, let us know. I've seen a giant jump in the number of people on our stream. We went from, like 20, 30 people consistently to like a couple of our streams have gotten kind of rowdy with like 200 people all on the stream at the same time. So super cool to see everyone. I love to be able to reach more people. And we had a bit of an outage, last time. So sorry about that, everyone, but we are back. So some things I wanted to talk about. There's one little hardware thing that came out this week. And if you didn't catch the last stream, my team and I went to Scale and we had a really good time. So Scale is Southern California Linux Expo. If you're a security person, you may not have heard of this conference, but I went to school at Pasadena City College. So Pasadena is right around the corner for me, and that's where this is held. And a lot of my computer science and IT and like electrical engineering professors were involved in Scale. So I got told about this pretty early, and I've been going to Scale for like, oh my gosh, like 5-6 years. Like it's really like I've been going for a long time. So I like this conference. It's super fun. It's comfortable. And that's where my team was. And just want to show some moments from that conference. The most coveted item here, this hat from the VLC people. If you didn't catch this last time, this hat was, everybody wanted this hat. Like it was so immediately obvious like what it was. And let's just say that you could run anything in VLC and have it work. So anyway, we had a bunch of hardware come out. We were talking about, also, has anybody seen Molvad VPN ads like in person? This was a first for me. What does expand? Sure. This was a first for me, but when I was in Los Angeles, I was taking the train to the beach and I saw this ad for Molvad VPN. So Molvad for me felt like a nicely kept little secret for a long time. Like I enjoy using Molvad. They're one of my favorite brands actually for VPNs, but it surprises me to suddenly see this kind of cat out of the bag. Like, when did you guys find out about Molvad? Like, I mean, obviously I've been seeing it for a while, but it's just interesting to me that as soon as I get to see brands that I like, that used to be kind of low key, where I felt like not that many people knew about it, like I just kind of ignored it for a while. I had signed up with Molvad for the first time, I think like 6 years ago, maybe something like that, when I first started doing Nullbyte. And yeah, it's interesting to see that they've grown bigger. That concerns me as a consumer of a VPN. But I mean, we'll see. It's interesting to see them just in public now. So if anybody else has been seeing these Molvad ads, let me know. I think it's interesting because I really do like them. I think they're cool. But at the conference, let's see if I posted any pictures. we debuted some hardware, some of which was really cool. Here we go. So one of them was these smart little pushins, like being able to take these, modify them, put WLED on them, control long strips of them was really awesome. But also something new came out. And of course, I don't have like a close-in camera set up, but I've been talking, let me go back here. I am also the producer, as you may know. So I have a little open source hacking tool here, our USB Nugget, and it is plugged into this new development board that is a perf board, basically. And I've been talking a lot about LoRa and all these cool things you can do over an extremely long range. And there's actually a specific development board being created for low-cost LoRa modules. But I just wanted to use the ones I already had and be able to throw together a prototype that doesn't require me being careful. So I have these great LoRa prototypes I've been playing with. They get miles of range, and I'm planning on doing some really cool videos with these miles of range. Like I can communicate with drones, I can do all this cool stuff. So I'm really interested in exploring this technology, but there's wires everywhere. My last LoRa prototype looked like this on the breadboard. So obviously this is not friendly to like throw in your backpack or start doing real development testing with. I guess you could sling this under a drone, and I have. But it's not really the best way of doing it. So this perf board allows me to put down all the hardware components I need. And in this case, I've actually made it so it's detachable, and I can just unplug and plug the hardware I need in to do testing. So when you're prototyping a hacking device or any sort of electronics hardware, first comes the idea, then comes the breadboarding, this beautiful squiggly plate of spaghetti. And then when you're pretty sure about the design you want, you can perf board it, and it'll become more durable for you to do your final testing. That's like day-to-day stuff to make sure that your design doesn't have any quirks that maybe you didn't expect. Maybe it gets caught on something, or like maybe there's a connection that needs to be optimized, or there's something that crops up after a lot of usage. You'd only really notice that with a prototype that's durable enough to work with. Now, as a hacker, if I'm only making one, like a single version of this was maybe where I would stop if I was making a hacking tool. So for a lot of these demos that we see of people like, throwing together some hardware and like hacking a car or something like that, a perf board is pretty much as far as they need to go, unless they're trying to mass produce or commercialize this device, or just make it really nice for their own like personal satisfaction, So this is cool. This basically means that with this add-on, I can show people how to make their own hacking devices by first having them breadboard, then having them slap it together with a microcontroller with a screen and buttons to make it easy for debugging and prototyping, and then they can make their own PCB. So I think this is really cool. I just wanted to share why I think it's so cool. So you'll probably see me playing with this in the near future. We're going to open source the design, so anybody who wants to make one can also add one to their projects. And yeah, it was really, really cool to debut some of this hardware and also get to play with it for the first time, because I was the one who requested this hardware as a frequent creator of hardware hacking tools. So, all right. So with that being said, like the entire train was a Mulvad ad. Whoa. Okay. So I guess I'm not the only person who is seeing Mulvad advertisements. Like the entire side of a train is a pretty big spend, I would say, in terms of advertising. And Tai Kwang Gong, can hacking be mastered? Yes, but of course, like that's a complicated question. Like I think that any area of hacking can be mastered, but I think like the entirety of hacking would be impossible in a human lifespan to like become a master of absolutely every aspect of hacking. So yes, but also no. Let's see. All right. So then I also have a scam, which has been put in jail. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about the news this week. So I have a lot of stories to go through, and one of them starts with my favorite conference that I've never been to. So if I was to pick a conference that like has the reward and the surprises that security researchers are looking for, this would be it. Pondaon is a conference where you can is a conference where you can go and get paid for finding and disclosing really serious security vulnerabilities. It's like the contest of people going in and dropping 0 days for large amounts of money and Teslas. There were a lot of them dropped this year, but there's frankly a lot dropped every year. And that's why for 0 day vulnerabilities, if you're looking for a bunch of smart people doing some of the dirtiest exploits to, brands that then this is the conference to check out. So I fully intend to find a way to go to this conference within the next couple of years, just because of how much news comes out of it. And everywhere they hold it, it's not just Vancouver. I've seen this also held in other places. It seems like a pretty popular concept. So as a hacker that goes to a lot of security conferences, this one is like on my list of ones I want to check out. But yeah, lots of vulnerabilities disclosed, some of them in Firefox, 2 of them specifically in Firefox, which were patched the next day, which is awesome. And also they won a $100,000 reward. So yeah, of all the arenas to ethically disclose research for recognition and also like a great bug bounty most times, this stands out as a conference that is really friendly towards people who have traditionally maybe had to compete with, I guess, like the black market in terms of like where you go to with your security vulnerabilities or your security research when vendors aren't willing to pay. So really cool event. Definitely check out more if you want to see the kinds of vulnerabilities that are disclosed at these events. But I just wanted to make anyone who, if you might have heard of DEF CON, you might have heard of Black Hat or RSAC, the RSA Security Conference, but these sorts of slightly smaller ones that have a lot of hard-hitting research, to me as a researcher, these are the ones I'm really interested in checking out more. All right, so we've seen a lot of these lately. The like marketplaces that are hosted in Europe, they're some of them are just called like Crime Market, like very literally. That was the German one, I believe, was Crime Market, and that was hosted relatively recently. Yes, Crime Market. So a lot of these European crime platforms seem like both very straightforward in terms of like how they are marketing themselves and branding themselves, and then also increasingly taken over or monitored by police agencies who infiltrate and then start pursuing arrests of individual sellers and buyers on the marketplace. So this is Nemesis Market. So this particular one was, I believe, hosted in Latvia. Yeah, no, sorry, Lithuania. So this was a marketplace that did have some restrictions on what they were willing to sell. It's kind of interesting because, like, in the eyes of police, like if you're, trafficking illegal narcotics, stolen credit card data, and cybercrime services, do they really care that you've set like certain? Oh yeah, that you've drawn the line at contract killing services and weapons. So I don't know. It's kind of funny to try to position yourself as the cybercrime market with a heart of gold, but whatever. Like, yeah, there's marketing to be done. Like if this is like virtue signaling, like crime marketing, then who am I to say that it didn't work? So at some point there was 150,000 user accounts and 1,100 seller accounts, with 20% of them based in Germany. As I said, a lot of these seem to be like based in Germany, and they also seem to be cases where the police will seize the overall architecture, but the individual sellers and the structure is still designed to protect the privacy of the people who are transacting on it. So I don't know how many actual arrests have come from these sorts of seizures, but the number one thing I see is police agencies basically saying, we're doing this all the time. We've already taken over marketplaces. You're never going to know if you're transacting on a marketplace that we control. And it's kind of an interesting psychological, like just fear tactic that these European police agencies are using to display seizure. Wow. They have a little animation. That's so playful. The police in Germany have excellent graphic design resources. But anyway, yeah, so this is kind of like a psychological campaign against these marketplaces to erode the confidence of sellers on these sorts of platforms and make it less likely for them to just move on to the next one. We saw kind of whack-a-mole where, it really like, it's difficult to take these down because another one just comes right up. But if sellers and buyers are afraid that the next one is actually going to be controlled by the police from the start, then it's much more likely that these start to slow down and they become a much less safe place, or at least the barrier to entry for somebody wanting to create a new one is a little bit higher. So seems to be a somewhat successful tactic, but I am not exactly up on the state of European cybercrime marketplaces. So if I'm wrong on that one, then please feel free to let me know. But just from the number of seizures I've seen, if I was someone who was making a lot of purchases on these, or if I was selling a lot of stuff on this, I would certainly feel a lot more nervous based on the number of arrests and seizures associated with these types of marketplaces recently. All right, so next we have the big news of the night. So this is a GoFetch attack on Apple Silicon CPUs. And the impact of this is being able to steal secret cryptographic keys and data from the CPU's cache. So what does this mean? Well, basically, this is a hardware flaw that does not seem to be able to be patched. So the kind of analogy I was thinking, and this isn't a technical analogy, but it's just like something where you can kind of understand where this lies, is I don't know if you guys remember like Spectre or Meltdown, but like Spectre was a speculative execution flaw in the way that these chips were designed, basically. And there was no way to mitigate it except to try something in software which caused a performance hit. So like that was a pretty stiff proposition for users to accept. Like, okay, like you're either going to have this weird flaw that's kind of difficult to explain, or you're going to have like a 20% performance hit across, you know, your entire like operating system. So yeah, that's pretty disappointing. So this was something that was discovered. It was disclosed, and Apple has been working to address the situation. But as of yet, it appears that there's no software fix that you can do to this that doesn't also come with a performance hit. So yeah, very, very interesting to see when one of these comes out, like what people do when the problem is actually like an architecture or like hardware flaw or design. Then while there is the ability to update this going forward, there isn't much people can do to mitigate this in the wild without actually, yeah, like suffering performance hits and seeing their daily experience get worse. So in my opinion, this is one of the worst types of vulnerabilities to discover, because not only is there nothing that can be quickly done about it, the average user is discouraged from doing it because of the obvious, you know, wanting to get the best performance out of their machine. Security versus convenience, like when it comes with a constant 20% like nerf on your system's processing power, is a pretty difficult proposition. So I'm not saying that that is the specific percentage that, you know, mitigating this is going to do. I'm just saying for some similar attacks in the past against other types of architecture, that has been the cost of fixing it. So really, really interesting like way of looking at the way these vulnerabilities crop up too. I'm not going to go too far into this one because frankly, like just like Spectre and Meltdown, this goes just to the edge of my understanding of computer science, like when we're talking about like the architecture inside like a processor. But the impact is pretty crazy. Being able to steal an RSA key is obviously not a something that you want when you're trying to keep data secure. So this is something that a lot of people are talking about now. Not just for the impact, but also because it's going to be so difficult to fix. All right, this is interesting. So people who use Linux get a couple choices like GNOME or KDE to manage Windows. So if you want to use, you know, graphical things, then you need to pick one of these. And you know, people are very divided about this. There's a lot of KDE fans. There's a lot of fans of like other graphic user window display managers, and I'm not going to weigh into that. I don't want to start any fights or anything, but it's it's been reported that some of these themes are able to execute arbitrary code. So when you decide you want like a certain theme to be able to manage your the look and feel of your desktop, you don't always know what kind of code is baked into them, even if it is hosted in the official KDE store. So apparently a user downloaded a theme that was hosted in the KDE store, apparently not a very popular one, or other people would have reported this. And at a certain point, it just wiped their entire system using the rm-rf command. So it's not totally known whether this was malicious or defective, but it certainly seems malicious. Like this isn't, you shouldn't run this command. I thought everybody who uses Linux, like when you sign up for Linux, like there's a couple commands you just learn to not run. And this is like one of the two that you shouldn't run. So if they didn't know that, they probably shouldn't be making themes for KDE. So pretty wild story. I don't really know how likely it is that the average user would have their system completely erased by a theme for KDE, but it certainly is possible. And KDE has basically said that like you need to be responsible for the outcome of this. We'll do our best to try to scan for these sorts of things in the future and try to make sure that things doing this like kind of blatant activity you know, don't make it through. But I think that based on this example, it's become pretty obvious that these sorts of plugins are a really, really tempting target for anybody who wants to potentially attack anybody who installs this. If you can get in that command, then you can get in anything. So I think attackers are going to take note and probably start to target these sorts of things as ways of injecting code, or having like a stager or something be placed into anyone's system who is using a certain kind of theme. Hello. Also, we are live. I see you. All right. So next up, this is my favorite disclosure of the week. So Unsaflock is a vulnerability that allows hackers to unlock millions of hotel room doors. What does this mean? Well, these MyFair keycards that are using a system developed by Saflock, electronic RFID manufacturers, are apparently vulnerable to a relatively easy attack that allows you to clone a card in seconds. So I have personally done this with a tool called MFOC, MFOC, and it is able to use an RFID reader to clone MyFair keycards for lots of different things. The problem here is you actually have to crack that keycard, and that can take a long amount of time. And also there's mitigations against this. Like, for example, if a building is issuing key cards, it can do one of two things. It can either issue a new security key, like a unique security key for every individual key that's created, or they can use the same key for every single key in the building. If they use the same key for every key in the building, then you can basically use your own key to crack that master encryption key and then copy anybody else's key in a second or less. So there have been vulnerabilities out here to do this sort of thing for a while, but they basically require you to have a long, uninterrupted session with the key in order to copy it. Now that this vulnerability has come out, let's take. All right, so this is the original key. Oh no, wait, sorry, that is a key that does not open the door. I believe that is a key for a different door in the same building. Let's see. So then taking key number 2 and writing to it. So I think what this means is like we're able to read enough information from the first key to generate a valid second key. Let's see. First key doesn't work. Second key does work. So that's really interesting to me. That was very, very fast compared to some of these previous exploits. And I wonder if anybody else has dabbled in this sort of research. Like if you have in the chat, let me know. I know that I personally have been very focused on RFID stuff, and the Flipper is able to do this incredibly slowly some of the time, provided that you go up to a reader and manage to get enough nonce pairs to be able to start reading key sectors and figuring out the rest of it. But yeah, seeing this sort of thing, it says that the hardware necessary to do this sort of attack costs, quote, a couple of $100s, and also that 64% of locks made by this manufacturer are still vulnerable to this attack. So if you see a lock by this manufacturer, which they look like this, by the way, you've probably seen them everywhere, there's a 64% chance that anybody can open this door with $200 worth of equipment. The other thing, everyone that's concerning about this vulnerability was not just like, introduced in the last year, in the last 2 years. This vulnerability was introduced 36 years ago. So the time period that this was available and the likelihood that let's just say like other agencies were aware of this and took advantage of this are pretty likely. It being a free market, I would imagine that some sort of universal door opener probably became available to somebody at some point that exploits this. But 36 years is a really long time for nobody to realize that you can just open almost any hotel door. So if you've been in a hotel over the past 36 years, you unknowingly have been staying in a place where with $200, anybody could potentially just walk in. So that's reassuring. Again, as a hacker, as a researcher, the likelihood that nobody else discovered or used this for 36 years seems about 0% to me. So yeah, I would just say that of all the types of flaws that people would like find and like absolutely not turn into the manufacturer, like this is probably one where most people who found this would probably quietly start a company that just sells some sort of like device that like exploits this like to police or whatever. Anyway, that's the end of my summary on this. But I just thought that this was like, for one, because of the duration of how long this vulnerability has been there, and for two, the fact that it probably affects every single person in this chat who's stayed in a hotel in the last 36 years. That's a pretty big impact. So like two really big things this week coming out, this one being by far my favorite. I think just because of the impact is extremely like serious. Like if somebody can get into your hotel room, that's a pretty big deal. The fact that it is still 64% unpatched and has been going on for like 30 plus years, like that to me is a pretty wild up and down in terms of a cyber story. So sorry to let you know. James says there was an FBI dude in a YouTube video claiming to have something like this, although I think he oversold its capabilities. Yeah, like I think that if you wanted to make money on a vulnerability like this, like you have two options. You go to Pwn to Own and you make like $100,000, or you quietly create a security consulting company that like, the FBI licenses your technology for the next several years to do raids on hotel rooms or something, like, I don't know. And I feel like in our economy, like, the option B might be the way that you end up sleeping in a hotel room that like, anybody could potentially access. Because like a bunch of people found it and then chose to keep quiet because it's more profitable, because like they don't actually get rewarded for turning in the vulnerabilities. It's getting better, I think, but this is an argument I've been making for a long time in terms of like how we need to incentivize hackers and researchers to turn their stuff in and get appropriately rewarded, when the alternative is either like blatant cybercrime, like NSO Group, or like creating something that's technically a crime, but only if people who aren't the government do it. I don't know. Like, I don't know. All right, so next up, we have I would describe this as like business email compromise attack against the Spa Grand Prix. What happened here is the organization had an email compromise. They had somebody be able to impersonate them while sending emails, and they immediately used it, not on other businesses to send invoices the way we typically do see with like business email compromise. They emailed all of the fans, promising them vouchers in exchange for like signing up and linking their accounts. So that seems like maybe it was a pretty effective attack. So this is a well-known organization. They obviously have a lot of people paying attention to it. So being able to email everybody who is interested in this event and try to get them to engage in the scam is a pretty brazen attack. They claim that their website, spagrandprix.com, was not impacted, which seems reasonable. Like most of the time it would just be, like an email compromise and no further than that, if that's the only thing that was exposed. But being able to pour through email often leads to finding secrets and other information about who might be able to get further into the system. So, that's not super encouraging. But yeah, the scam was a $50 voucher, or sorry, €50 voucher for purchasing tickets. And I honestly would have made it juicier than that, but maybe that was just the right amount to entice people into wanting to go to it. So yeah, being able to steal people's banking information just from accessing the organization's like email address is pretty impactful. Like I have to say, like as a brazen way of just hitting up everyone's customers, posing as them, and having them buy tickets for an expensive event at a understandable or reasonable discount. Like while the infrastructure here was probably shut down pretty quickly, this is has the hallmarks of a pretty successful business email compromise attack. All right, moving along. This is an interesting attack that allows you to create an infinite loop at the application layer protocol, I believe it was, that impacts still 300,000 online devices. So these are mostly devices that have not been upgraded. So these are older protocols that contain flaws that make it so you can use a single host to create an infinite loop and create tons and tons of traffic in the process. So if two application servers have a vulnerable implementation of said protocol, an attacker can initiate a communication with the first server, spoofing the network address of the second server. So the way this attack works is I send a packet to one server that is pretending to be from the second server. And as soon as that's received, it creates an infinite feedback loop where it then messages the other computer who's like, oh, no, you called me. No, you called me. And they basically go back and forth between each other, trying to figure out who called who forever. This consumes resources and also makes it so the servers are unable to respond to normal traffic, effectively taking them offline. So by using spoofing, you can create these conversations with any vulnerable server and basically pair them off to the point that you can take sections of a network offline or create a denial of service attack and also exhaust system resources all in one transaction. Pretty clever, right? So this, again, mostly impacts systems that have not been updated. Most of these attacks have been fixed. So yeah, like while this is a very interesting attack, like if you were doing like my friend is a CTF where they simulate being under attack by a ATP. So it's basically like a government agency tasks some of their like dirtiest computer people to attack these like literal like computer science students, like terrible architecture, or infrastructure, which is given to them beforehand in awful condition. So the challenge is like the students have to like patch everything really quickly and try to deploy like open source like firewall rules and other things to try to like keep these people out. And the students always lose, but that's the point, you know, like you deploy some of the best people in the world against like a bunch of amateurs and like kind of see what happens. It's cool. Like this is the kind of thing that they would be saddled with where like they would get a bunch of systems all vulnerable to this. So as soon as they got everything up and running, like, you know, the APT would be able to take half of their systems offline by pairing them with each other and then like exhausting the resources of their limited servers by like creating voluminous conversations that waste tons and tons and tons of data and time. So yeah, real world impacts. Like, so you can expect to see these crop up in real attacks, I would imagine, as taking important systems offline is always a priority of attackers. I have mixed feelings about this one. So GitHub has now gone a step further from push protection, which was making sure that you're not accidentally sending secrets out with your GitHub pushes, and is now also taking on the responsibility of attempting to fix security vulnerabilities. So I was complaining recently that GitHub doesn't do enough about this. Like, in fact, it's still AI isn't doing enough about this. It's still difficult sometimes to get ChatGPT to look at code and try to spot vulnerabilities because that could be malicious research, you know, like you could be looking to attack that code. So it has like a weird dual ethical responsibility to both like answer you and then also not enable attacks that make it really, really difficult for this sort of thing. So it looks like GitHub is now implementing a version of this that is not ethically conflicted about scanning code for vulnerability. So the hacker side of me is like, oh, okay, so now if I just take someone else's code and paste it in here, maybe I can use the suggested fixes to figure out what types of vulnerabilities are in other code. So I was like, yes, cool, that's interesting. But also for my own code, I can have it take a look at the vulnerability and propose a fix. Now, I might not understand that fix. That fix could change the fundamental layout of my code. It could make other problems that can't be anticipated or create bugs that are difficult to fix. There's lots of problems with having another programmer looking over your shoulder and proposing fixes when they might not understand the full context of your code or what you're trying to do. So while I appreciate this, and I think that it is one of the better applications of AI, I'm a little concerned. My hacker side is like, great, I can hack other people's code. There's no issue here. But my software developer side is saying like, okay, so now I have like a security person inserting themselves into my code, a security AI inserting themselves into my code and giving me suggestions that they might not understand the impact of or have any responsibility to fix down the line. So like if they suggest a bunch of stuff and it like breaks other things or creates another issue, or even worse, doesn't fully mitigate the issue, I can feel like I'm like patting myself on the back. I'm like, oh, I'm so good at security. I fixed all these vulnerabilities, when in fact the AI incompletely patches these or doesn't fully understand what the problem is and like proposes something that doesn't really fix it. So my concern is like a false sense of confidence where this thing is going to like potentially propose fixes that don't actually fix the problem or create new problems down the line. And that's why having like security competency, I don't think we can replace that with AI yet. But I mean, screw it, let's try, right? Like that's what GitHub is doing. So if you are someone that likes to analyze code for vulnerabilities, guess what? This is now in public beta. And if you are somebody who is hoping to improve your own programming from this, guess what? You might have bugs inserted into your code. But this is purely speculative. Like, I've been working with ChatGPT to write code for a long time, and I think that the hardest part is making sure it has all of the context for your intentions. If you are, programming this for one thing, but like might be using it for other things, and you don't let the AI know that, it's not going to have that intention in mind at all. And it could break important things that you need later, or again, incompletely patch something. So yeah, I'm a little concerned that like with like GitHub proposing bug fixes and like nobody being there to actually validate if it fully fixes the problem, that we might be creating a situation where like developers feel like they're fixing things and they're not. And they basically have a list of all these things that they're counting as accomplishments that were fixed that actually really need to be validated by a real security professional. Let's see. Question: what do I think of Minstrel AI for so I have heard of Minstrel AI. I have not tried it, and thus I cannot weigh in on it yet, but I will put it on my list of stuff to check out, along with advances with Claude and Gemini. Are we doing? Yeah, we're doing Gemini now. I don't like that we're like naming these powerful AIs after like horoscopes or whatever, or maybe we're saying that it's star systems, but like I just feel like they're horoscopes. It feels evil to me. I don't know. I just pick something nice. I think Claude sounds goofy enough that we should just give all AIs like names that are easy to bully. That's just my opinion. All right. Like, I don't want to go to war with Gemini, but like going to war with like, someone with a goofy name, like maybe that would be a little, I would feel better pushing back against it. But anyway, sorry, I digress. AI is inserting itself in all sorts of places. And devs, I would argue that this is technically like DevSecOps, and that is a pretty specialized like field. So yeah, again, interesting to see this being proposed. I think it addresses some of the core vulnerabilities of the existing AI tools, but let's see if it completely fixes the problem or just gives people a sense of accomplishment without a real outcome. All right, so Avanti is still in the news. We've been talking about this for 4 weeks now, maybe 5 weeks. So Avanti is warning customers that they need to patch some security vulnerabilities that were reported by NATO. When NATO reports a security vulnerability, that's not great. So in spite of that, they are saying that there is no active exploitation at the moment, but this is for their, what is it called? Gatekeeper. Sorry, they have so many products. Trying to keep them all straight is is difficult. But yeah, so this is for one of their products. So there we go, standalone Sentry. I knew I read it earlier. There's just like so many other, yeah. I don't know what any of that is. So standalone Sentry is apparently vulnerable to this. It looks as though there's not active exploitation, but now that the cat is out of the bag, you can expect it to become a target for adversaries. So another Avanti update for all those people who just managed to catch a break from last week or the week before or the week before that. All right, so we've also talked about how Flipper Zero is potentially going to get banned for import from Canada, or at least there's a discussion to do that based on its status as a harmful car stealing tool. These sorts of attacks are much more sophisticated than Flipper is capable of doing. While there are some sorts of attacks you can stage with a Flipper against a vehicle, they typically require a lot of work or are not practical for attackers. I saw a great demo at DEF CON of somebody unlocking a vehicle with a Flipper, but that had been like captured. Like there was a vulnerability that was being exploited there, that the Flipper was just demonstrating the vulnerability. It wasn't like exploiting the vulnerability per se. So I think that people get confused about that. There's a distinction to that for me, where it's just like, another tool is doing the work here, but the Flipper is the one that's like, pressing the button because it's visual. Like that makes sense to me. But I think the Canadian officials were just looking at it very literally and did not understand the distinction. So Flipper weighed in here, and the creators of the Flipper Zero were talking about how like these sorts of attacks are actually done by much more expensive devices that are single purpose. And that these sorts of general purpose security devices like the Flipper are essential for improving the state of security, and banning them is not what you want to do. So these are the actual pieces of hardware that you need to steal cars. They're keyless repeaters, and they are man-in-the-middle devices that allow you to get close to a customer's keys that might be hanging on a hook or something and amplify them to unlock the car and leave. So yeah, that is, I mean, something that is a lot more expensive and difficult to do than just running a flipper to like unlock a car from a captured handshake or something like that you've done with another tool. So we'll see how this debate goes, but a lot of people obviously are pretty upset that flippers might be banned in Canada. So we'll see what the outcome of this debate is. So we have another example of misconfigured databases leaking millions and millions of credentials. So cybersecurity researchers discovered 19 million plaintext passwords exposed by misconfigured instances of Firebase. This is Google's platform for hosting databases, cloud computing, and app development. And even though there is a secure sign-in option readily available, a lot of companies were accidentally exposing all this information publicly. So after contacting a lot of these organizations, only 1% of them responded, but roughly, 1% of the owners replied, but 1/4 of the notified site administrators fixed the misconfigurations. That leaves 75%. Unfortunately, I love the screenshot. So unfortunately, like, as they were reporting this vulnerability to people from the company, they they got replies like this from one of the companies that was involved in like leaking all of their customers' like information. So for somebody like actively like allowing universal access to all of their customers' accounts, this is a pretty snotty reply, I have to say. So I don't really I don't really know what like the chicken with the bat means here. But I don't think that this is the way this is supposed to go. So yeah, I, I don't really know what to say. Like, we see these sorts of problems all the time. Firebase is a very popular service, and often when trying to contact the people who are actually like making their customers very, very vulnerable, security researchers end up getting responses like that. So hopefully that guy didn't actually send the chicken with the bat after the researcher. I hope that that was an empty threat. But yeah, I see these sorts of stories all the time. And just the fact that this is 19 million plain text passwords that are still 75% exposed. Yeah, wow. So the FTC is warning scammers, is warning that scammers are impersonating its employees and reaching out to individuals pretending to be the government. They are typically netting between $3,000 and $7,000 in fake fines and fees and that sort of thing. So yeah, these sorts of like email phishing attacks and other sorts of attacks convincing people they owe money to the government have been around forever, I believe. Just a notable spike in them, as well as the value of the amounts taken from people targeted by these scams. So we've seen a lot of companies talking about all the great AI tools that they have released, and often they are charging more money for these sorts of AI innovations. Wow, what a weird digital face bleeping computer. Good for you. This case is talking about how a number of financial advisors started saying that they were using AI-fueled investment, that they were crunching all this data, that they were doing all of this, innovative, groundbreaking AI work, and when in fact they were doing nothing. So the Security and Exchange Commission fined them $175,000 and $224,000, plus $400,000 in civil penalties for making completely false statements about the degree to which they were using AI to decide on investments. So it's one of those scams where like they're like, it's the machine, it's an amazing machine, and then they pull back the curtain and it's just like 25 outsourced people like in another country, like doing the work. So yeah, we've seen a lot of companies really trying to sell AI products, and we've also seen some companies lose stock value after a lot of those AI promises ended up not really panning out. I'm not going to name any, but I'm just going to say I was doing some graphic work last night, and I was trying to like insert things and whatever. I was just like, this sucks. Like, this is actually like kind of terrible. So yeah, it is pretty it's pretty cool to actually see some of these companies that were selling literally nothing face consequences for lying about it and charging customers more for AI tools that were not actually AI powered and not actually doing anything. All right, we're almost at the end of the stream, but we have Fujitsu finding malware on their systems They're confirming some data theft, but they don't know exactly what was stolen yet. And we can expect to see further fallout from this probably on next week's stream. One of those like in progress sorts of attacks where it seems big and the business has acknowledged that they've been hit, but finding out exactly what's going on is still a little difficult here. This is my argument against mechanical keyboards. So another acoustic attack has come out with a 43% average success rate against being able to determine what key someone is typing, even in poor conditions like environments with noise. The louder the keyboard, obviously, the better the success on this. And if you type really weird, it will also break this attack. So if you type like super fast or really irregularly, then it can make it more difficult for this attack to work. But basically, if you're able to capture enough information about keyboard sounds, you can then later on determine which key is being placed with relative accuracy. So if you're trying to, extract or determine like what someone's conversation is about, like the context and kind of fill things in, then this is a pretty effective attack. Like if I'm seeing this as like a ciphertext and I'm able to decrypt 43% of this unknown information just like acoustically, then like that is really, really interesting to me because I can probably reconstruct the rest to be able to get the context of the conversation or understand what's being said. If I'm being used this to get someone's literal password, then the 43% is enough sometimes. But if it's like one of those like high security passwords, like it's not going to be enough for that. Or if it's like a long password, but generally if someone's typing in their password manually, one would assume it would be like words and maybe you could reconstruct that. So I'm not going to totally discount this attack. I will say though, that the solution here is just have a quieter keyboard and this attack doesn't work. That is actually noted by the people in the study. But if you want to see some interesting ways of figuring out what your person with a mechanical keyboard nearby is typing, this actually seems to work relatively well. 43% is pretty good, honestly. So you won't be able to type in their password, but you will be able to see if they're talking about you or what the contents of their email probably would be, just from having access to a microphone in the proximity of their keyboard. That is pretty wild. All right, so we're seeing prison time for a bunch of people involved in cybercrime this week. One of them was the administrator of a stolen account marketplace. Another one of these, I would describe them as like heart of gold marketplaces that only like sells like certain things and like specializes in things that they think are maybe less harmful than, I don't know, murder for hire or whatever. This is after a December guilty plea admitting to running e-routes, which provided access to a number of different organizations who had been compromised. This becomes basically a marketplace for initial access brokers. So people who specialize in getting access into a bunch of random companies, it doesn't really matter. They just spam phishing attacks and whatever. And anybody that they manage to hook, they put on this marketplace for larger cyber criminal organizations to purchase access and then, begin some sort of ransomware campaign or something more profitable, or maybe an espionage campaign if it's a nation state actor. We also see a former telecommunication manager admitting to doing SIM swaps for $1,000 in Bitcoin. So this, honestly, there were a lot of people talking about this on Twitter saying that this person should have gotten more time for this just because people who facilitate SIM swapping attacks have massive impacts on their victims. It basically allows hackers to completely take over their accounts, especially if they use phone-based two-factor authentication. So the scenario here is like, you would wake up one morning and all of your accounts would be compromised at the same time because somebody managed to pay a telecommunications manager to like SIM swap your account in the middle of the night. This was a really popular type of attack that was used against journalists, all sorts of people. And it's something that a lot of people were like, oh, how does this work? Are these hackers such good social engineers that they're able to, trick telecommunications managers like all the time? The answer is no. Like sometimes it is actually an inside job. So this person is getting 5 years for it, but a lot of people have been saying that that is relatively light considering how intense and like specific the impact is on the victims of these sorts of crime. And then finally, we have some of the riskiest cyber criminals. Ransomware affiliates are the ones that actually stick their neck out and run the software, run the campaigns, and are the highest likelihood of being caught when doing ransomware attacks. The people behind the attacks might be the ransomware developers and also the initial access brokers that maybe don't get in trouble because their role in the attack is less. It's the actual affiliates that are the ones that are getting the intense scrutiny, as they are the ones who are pursuing these campaigns against companies. So they're the ones that set off the ransomware. They're the ones that accept the ransom. And the people who get paid in the background are often the initial access broker for access to the company in the first place, and the ransomware developers for writing the software. So a Russian-Canadian cyber criminal, Mikhail Vasilov, was sentenced to 4 years in prison, which seems a little light, for participating in, quote, thousands of these attacks. This was apparently something that he started doing during the pandemic, and due to the volume of his attacks, was called a cyber terrorist for going after all these companies. In addition to the imprisonment, he's being asked to pay $860,000 in restitution to Canadian victims, but he also then might be extradited to the United States, where he also faces charges. Lockbit has not been doing so great after their run-in with law enforcement, where a lot of their operations were seized or shut down. Since then, they've posted a lot of evidence showing that they're compromising companies, but most of that evidence has been from 2023. So it's unclear as to whether they have any new victims since then. And that's just about it. So tons of things going on this week. Some really interesting vulnerabilities and some further evidence that anybody who's using a sufficiently loud mechanical keyboard can be humbled in multiple ways. So great to see everybody on the stream. It was very lively again. We're up to 126 people. I remember back when it was 26 people. So I think I'll continue to do these streams a little bit later. Missing Killian this time, but he will be back next time. So we will see everyone again on our Wednesday stream. And if you enjoy the stream, if you want to keep it going, there's an easy way you can do that. You can go to varonis.com/Kody. That's Kody. It lets everybody at Varonis know that you enjoy the stream. It's free for you to do, and it'll keep us going for quite some time to go. So this week at that link, we have a presentation on generative AI and how companies are implementing it, and also what the risks are. So if you're interested in supporting the stream, feel free to click that link, sign up, and we will see everybody next week on our live Q&A stream. So if there's anything you asked that got buried in all the news this week, you can go to our, let's see, all the different ways. You can go to our YouTube channel and leave it there. You can also go to our Discord server and leave it there. And I will make sure to answer your questions next week. And what are our upcoming events? So I'm getting ready to go to the RSA Security Conference, RSAC. So if you are heading to RSA, I would love to say hello. The Varonis booth is going to be huge, and I will be all over the conference doing some live content and all that. I just booked my flight yesterday. So we're going to be going there. And then also, I believe the Layer 1 conference is coming up in late May, and we are also going to be attending that in Los Angeles. So hopefully we will see all of you at a conference in the near future. All right, everyone, that's all we have for today. See you next week. Goodbye.